Hello and welcome to another episode of Midierror Meets, the monthly music podcast where we talk to a wide range of people from the music scene. This month I'm speaking to Scott Diaz, who's a prolific producer, DJ, remixer and label owner based in Brighton and the US. He's released a huge number of records of his own in the house and garage genres, as well as remixing some of the biggest artists on the scene. He's toured the world DJing and, in 2016, set up his own record label, Grand Plans. I caught up with Scott to talk about his career, his motivations, his influences on a very hot summer's day earlier this year. So let's check out what happened. Scott Diaz, thank you very much for speaking to me today.
Thanks for having me on.
It's really good to join you in your studio here in Brighton on this beautiful summer's day.
Yeah, it's hot in here.
Yeah. Cool. Well, the first thing I like to ask people in my podcast is, what were your earliest musical memories?
Well, my earliest musical memories would have been my dad playing stuff, records, tape, CDs, whatever. Kind of like rock stuff, Eric Clapton, Led Zeppelin, blues stuff, B.B. King, Rolling Stones, Johnny Winter, UB40, all that kind of era. Mm-hmm. And a few other kind of more obscure like bands like Talking Heads, Yes. So I guess that would be considered a bit more sort of experimental kind of stuff for the time. So it's like listening to that, and I would just like I'd listen to the top 40 and I'd like record stuff off the top 40. I'd get ask my dad to like give me a blank tape or one that I could record over or whatever. Mm-hmm. And I'd do that, and sometimes I would like try and mix things on the two tapes. They would play at the same time, and I'd try to mix stuff. And I remember mixing Unchained Melody, the Righteous Brothers. Like, remember when Robson and Jerome covered it?
Yeah,
do you remember that?
Yeah, I do.
It was like a big got in the chart because they were in that ITV program that was doing well. They were like the kind of nation sort of they were really popular at the time, right?
Yeah.
And so basically they covered Unchained Melody, and it was like obviously a real slowy, and it didn't have much in the way of drums, right? It was kind of very like it was almost, I guess it was almost just like a brush kit kind of vibe, very very light.
Yeah, definitely.
So I recorded that, and kind of it was almost like a reprise version. So I thought, I didn't know it was a reprise at the time, but I just knew it didn't have any drums. And then I recorded like a dance track and put that on the other deck, or the other tape deck, and that was what was it? Do you remember Blur, Girls and Boys, what it was called?
Yeah.
Well, there was a dance version of that called Blurred, and it was like they sampled it, and I loved it. It had a piano. I think it was by a guy called Pianoman.
Mm-hmm. Which I think was Fatboy Slim, possibly.
No, it's a guy called James Salmon, maybe. I think I'm friends with him on Facebook now, which is really funny because I'm like, hey, you're like Pianoman. You did that song like Blurred, which I loved. Like I didn't know it, anything about it. But yeah, I remember basically just trying to mix those two records together and just being like, I can kind of put the vocal over this. And obviously it was completely out of time and probably completely out of key.
Yeah.
But I just remember kind of being interested in this idea that like, you can kind of combine these two things and it makes something different. And there's like a different feeling here now. And so that was kind of my first sort of, intro into sort of like doing some kind of mixing, I suppose. But it wasn't until a few years later that I would get into DJing, kind of dance culture and all that sort of stuff.
Definitely, because I mean, well, first of all, the bands that you spoke about in the beginning there's a very eclectic range of music.
Yeah,
there's so many different strains of blues and rock, and yeah, like ska-y sort of dub stuff with UB40.
Yep,
that's a great sort of smorgasbord of music to be listening to. Were you ever tempted to like pick up a guitar? Did your dad play the guitar?
No, I mean he's basically he's into guitar music essentially is probably how you would describe it, like Tom Petty and all that kind of stuff. But I think for me, the way that I grew up, we grew up basically with no money, so my life growing up wasn't particularly good, and my relationship with my dad actually is not particularly good. But that's kind of one of the things that that he's sort of given me, if you like.
Yeah.
I've got like a kind of love for music because of him, and so I'm happy, I'm pleased for that. But other than that, so going back to your question about learning an instrument, it just wasn't a reality for me. Because I knew that it would cost money, and I knew that my parents didn't have it, and I knew that there's obviously like you just. I mean, I was kind of growing up the way we lived. I was sort of very hyper aware of the fact that we kind of lived a certain way and we didn't have money and stuff. So I would never have sort of wanted to put pressure on my parents or my mum to be like, oh, I really want to do this. And so like I basically went out at 16 and got a job straight away because I knew that I kind of needed to earn money. And I would have loved to have stayed in education. I did end up going to Northbrook College like 2 years after that. Which I went, paid for myself. It was a small cost, but nothing like what it would be to go to university today. I think it was like
especially nowadays, it's like phenomenal.
I think it was like £800 for a year or something. It's like £200 a term or something. And Northbrook had only been running a year or two at that point. Now it's a completely fully funded sort of public like college. But at the time, I think it was still public, but there was a something you had to pay towards it. So anyway, I went there with a couple of friends of mine. And I did that kind of a couple of years later. But when I initially left school, I knew that I had to go out and work. And so that kind of was just, the way I went about things. But obviously I was into dance music by then. I was still going out. I was still putting on my own nights. I was still buying records. And it wasn't until kind of after that I thought about, I really should learn an instrument if I'm actually going to, make music. You should learn a musical instrument. So that sort of came later on. I wish I'd done it when I was 4, 5, 6, because it would have given me a massive head start.
Well, I think in some ways for you and like a lot of people, their first forays then into making music and putting music together was the cassette machine you were talking about. So you grew up in Brighton.
Correct.
You grew up in Brighton. And yeah, so when did you have like a vision or like something that you'd aspire to be like early on in your music career?
Not really, and I don't know how the best way of sort of answering that is. I think that me and my friends, I met a group of people in a record shop in Brighton. It was actually on Gardner Street, which is close to here, and it was a drum and bass shop, and it was owned by Martin, who is Crafty Cuts. Wow. He owned the shop. Dave Stone, who used to run, did Meltdown and who ran the label Sour, drum and bass label Sour back in the day, and Ed Solo, who's obviously a local Brighton producer, drum and bass producer and engineer, who's amazingly talented and has done really well. JFB also was in there a fair bit. Obviously the DMC UK champion. He was kind of around at the time. And I met a bunch of people in this record shop, and DJ Quantum was working in there, and he was kind of very influential in helping all of us, all these youngsters basically kind of come through. So we were into drum and bass and jungle at the time, and we were like buying records and kind of going to raves and doing all this kind of stuff. And I went in this record shop. I ended up meeting them, and we became firm friends. We're still all friends now. But after that, we kind of started we had this little collective basically, and we kind of just did everything together. So we would, any records that we would buy, they would all stay at like one guy's house. We would all pitch in and get little bits of studio equipment, and then everything would be around there, and we'd go there and make music. And it was like it was hard, obviously, with all us being young, to afford kind of everything we wanted, but by being like, well, look, hey, there's this sampler, why don't you put in this much, and then you put in this much, and I put in this much, and we'll get this Akai S3000 or this desk or whatever. And so then we kind of had this like pool of stuff that we could use. And so when we were all doing that, we promoted a few events as well. We did something at the Escape, which is now Patterns. We did something at the Concord 2. We did something at the Zap, which was Digital, which is now the Arch. So we did a few events, and we were going out all the time. We were travelling to London. We were travelling to Hastings Pier. We were travelling to Maidstone. We were going to all these kind of all-night raves and stuff like that. And so I think the way we viewed it was just that we just wanted to do something in music. I just viewed it like I wanted to make a living from music, basically. That was kind of my first point of, this is my achievement. I just want to be able to say I just make music, or I'm in the music business in whatever capacity that is, and I'm earning a living from it, and I don't do anything else. But then, of course, once you reach that point, you're like, well, actually now I want to do this, and I want to do that, and I want to get a record played on Radio 1, and now I want, and all that kind of stuff. So I think all of these kind of moments come afterwards. But I think initially, from the outset, for me, I was just trying to do it full time because of what I love doing. So I just thought, well, if I can make a living at it, it will just allow me to do it every day.
Yes.
You know, and that's kind of the aim. The aim, the beginning. You think it's the end game. You think that, well, that's all I want. I just want that, and then you get to that point, and obviously your horizons have been broadened so much that you're like, no, I want to travel, and I want to do this now. I want to play at that festival, and I want to remix this person, get on that label, and get in touch with this person, or and all these people that you look up to a lot of them end up becoming your friends.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like you become peers with them essentially. Whereas obviously at the beginning the relationship isn't like that.
No.
It's like very much like a fan. Sort of art or fan celebrity, because to you they kind of are celebrities, right? They're like these famous people that you kind of have these ideas about. I used to think that, like, obviously after I was into the drum and bass thing, I was into garage, and that's kind of where I really started to, I moved away from Brighton and kind of went and lived somewhere else, and I met loads of people in the garage scene and started to actually make progress. But like I used to have this idea that everybody in the garage scene was all friends and they all went around each other's house for cups of tea, and you have this idea that there's this giant community and everyone loves each other and all that, and because you're from the outside looking in, you think that's what it's like, and then of course you get in there and you're like, oh, this person doesn't like that person, and this person screwed this person over with a label deal, and this person doesn't like this person's with this person's ex-girlfriend, and all, vice versa or whatever, and it's like you realise there's like a lot of politics and people don't always really like each other. But yeah, initially I just wanted to make a living from music, and that's kind of where it started, really.
That's brilliant, and I think that's a superb thing that you had between your group of friends, where you would collectively buy pieces of gear and share it. That's quite an amazing way of working, and I've never spoken to anyone who's done that. But yeah, you must have had access to way more than just a singular person who's buying and saving for records and things themselves.
Yeah.
What sort of gear did you buy back in the day? Can you remember?
Yeah, we had Novation Bass Station, Novation Supernova, Akai S3000, a Behringer desk. We had some little, I can't remember what they were, but they were like little effects units. It was like a reverb unit and a delay. It wasn't like a space echo or anything. It was just like a cheap kind of digital delay that you probably picked up for like 100 quid or 120 quid or something. It's probably like a Boss, and there was some Behringer compressor as well. I can't remember.
Yeah.
It's a 30. No, it's not 33069. That's a Neve, but it was something like that. It was some kind of cheap sort of Behringer compressor, and I remember the desk was always breaking down all the time, and ever since then it's really put me off buying Behringer products until the Model D.
Until this new wave.
But they had back then they had a bit of a reputation for being quite like flaky and would just break down all the time and kind of wouldn't work, and we had to send it back. We bought it from GAC, actually, Guitar Amp and Keyboard Center, and we had to send it back, take it back to them. They had to kept having to send it off to Germany all the time, so we would have weeks where we just wouldn't have it, and obviously at that time you needed a desk. There was no like, well, I'll just mix in the software then or whatever.
Yeah.
Desk. So but yeah, so that's the way we did it. I'm trying to think what else we picked up over the years.
What you also must have done in that collective situation, because you're using the same pieces of gear within your group, there must have also, there's a shared element of learning together as well. Maybe I imagine someone would have come in and gone, oh, I found out this thing you can do on that sampler that no one knew you could do.
Yeah. There was definitely an element, and also it's kind of vibey because you're in a room with other people that you're already friends with anyway, and now you're kind of on this learning journey and this learning process, and so every day is like you're making stuff that really, if you listen to it now, it doesn't stand up obviously to anything, but at the time you could do, you might just have something cool with a vocal, or because you're all kind of at the same level, like talent wise, you're all learning, right? So there's no sort of you're not intimidated, you're not thinking, oh, this person knows a lot more than I do, or this person's been playing keyboard for 20 years and I don't know what I'm doing, or whatever. There's none of that, because but essentially you're all kind of learning essentially at the same rate at that point. And so it's cool because one person will do something and you're all really excited about it. And that kind of fosters this, someone's like, oh, I just pitched this vocal, or they played a bass line that's just accidentally played something that's really musically in key, and so of course it sounds really pleasing to you, but you don't understand why, because they're just like, oh no, I just pressed that and then pressed that. What you don't understand was, oh yeah, well that's all that scale is F sharp minor. You don't realize that you did that, but you did, right? And years later you figure that out. And so that's why it makes sense. Oh yeah, we've done this trick, and you get all these like awesome little accidents that happen, right? And they continue to happen as you kind of keep making music. But at the beginning, there's like this really nice kind of period where you're just like doing stuff, and you're kind of just getting this immediate like reward. You're getting this immediate like good feeling back about it, and then add to that the fact that you're in a room with other people that you already really like, and you're getting their energy as well, and it just sort of perpetuates you to keep facilitates and perpetuates you keep on making music, really, and it just gives you that energy to keep going. And sometimes if I was sitting in a room probably with all that equipment and I didn't know what I was doing, and you didn't have somebody else like you're on the synth doing this and messing around, and they're trying to do something with a sampler, and you'd have to do all that by yourself, and it kind of sucks the life out of you a bit if you don't know what you're doing.
And especially the thing of, like you say, about bouncing off another person. It's like, for example, if you go to the cinema by yourself and you leave by yourself, it's such an empty, hollow experience, because you've got no one to speak to and go, oh, did you like the bit when the thing came in, and what was that guy about? It's like
trying to answer questions. How do you think that's going to end, or where does that go? There's no like shared experience moment, is there?
Exactly. And it's similar, like, I mean, it's very rarely happen, when you go to a restaurant by yourself. Like, for me, that is like the worst possible experience of my whole life, going to a restaurant by myself. I just eat the food really quick and then leave, because I just can't deal with. You
sort of feel really like bad going. They're like, just one, just me. You sort of feel like there's a real social sort of faux pas, isn't it? It's like, oh, you really like you need to eat, but you just don't have any friends, do you? It's like that kind of. I hear that. I think there's a potentially, I don't know how we would measure it, or like what data we could use to extrapolate whether this is the case or not, but I kind of have a feeling that there's a lot of music being made now. Well, I'm sure of it, that there's a lot of music being made by people by themselves, and there isn't always that sort of collective like community type spirit anymore, about kind of like, oh, you have a studio and a bunch of people just use it, and it happens a little bit, and obviously there are some collectives and kind of crews that are doing stuff, but like what you have now with the advent of the internet and the way people communicate over social media and all this kind of stuff, and especially the way people create stuff, is that you can sit in a room by yourself and make music, and you can basically release a track to the world without any one other person ever having heard it. And so you kind of have this like, well, it's finished. Like, I made this thing and I finished it, and I gave it to my distributor, and now it's on iTunes or Spotify or Traxsource or Beatport or whatever. Years ago, that never would have happened. There was no, I just made this thing and I put it out and no one's heard it. I'm the only one that's heard it, and I decided that it's finished. You never had that. And so to circle back to what you were just saying about having a bunch of people working together, there was this like, there was like a filter element, because you kind of had like built-in A&R with all these people. They didn't know they were A&Ring, but they were just like, no, this just doesn't sound right to me, or this should be longer, or I kind of want this to happen. What they're doing is they're A&Ring the record. So you're filtering out like, okay, cool. So it's like the wisdom of crowds, right? The idea that 10 people can make a better record than one person is going to hold true for a certain number of times. It might not be true every time, because it's, you might get to a point where you're like, too many cooks spoil the broth kind of vibe. But there's definitely an idea that like, well, if I play keyboards and you're an engineer, and the next person's a singer, and the next person's really good at recording vocals, and each of you have got your own job, and then this person's like, well, I'm a mastering engineer, so I'll master it for you, and then you've got 5, 6, 7, 8 people involved in the production of that record. Chances are it's going to be multiples better and multiples more vibey than if you're just like, well, I kind of just do everything to a competent level. And that's kind of what you have to do now. Absolutely. So I think there's an element of that now. There's an element of like, there isn't that the vibey stuff doesn't always happen sometimes, because you haven't got anyone else to be like, no, that sounds really good, don't touch it. You talk yourself out of it, right? You talk yourself out of it, you make it all really clean, you can go back and revise it 100 times, so you do. Whereas before it was like, right, we've got this remix up, right, and it's for, I don't know, Boys to Men, right, and it's due tomorrow and we're mixing it today. You would do like 10 passes of that mix, vocals up, vocals down, instrumental, drums up, drums down, whatever other elements.
Panning things.
Yeah, you'd be messing around,
places.
tweaking the levels. I will drop this bit out on that mix, and you'd have to detail like this on the DAT, like this is what this pass is, this is what this pass is. Because next day when you start a new project, all those levels come down again, and it's going to be difficult for you to get it back exactly where it was.
Yeah.
You're changing everything. You're changing all the settings and all your outboard gear, all your compressors, all your delays, reverbs, all the sends, or everything. Everything gets adjusted. So it's not just there is no recalling it, right? So that's why you would go to the extra trouble of like, well, since it's like this, let's just do 10 versions, so the label can't say, well, the vocal's not loud enough or it's too quiet. You'd have everything, something to cover, or at least somewhat go towards making up those potential deficiencies that you might have because of human error or being late at night mixing or whatever it might be. And so like you don't kind of that was the way it was, but now we don't have that because you can go back 100 times and edit it and adjust and tweak you do, right? And so because of that, often you can lose a bit of the magic, and I'm guilty of it myself sometimes, but it's trying to train yourself to be like, no, that sounds good enough.
Yes.
Let's leave it rough around the edges, or certain choices that you make. And so, to go back to your original thing, it's like, I think part of that is missing now, the idea that like there isn't other people to kind of filter what you're doing and A&R what you're doing just by naturally, like, not even the sense of like they're trying to be an idiot about it, but it's just your mates being like, yeah, I'm not sure that really works. And that is a natural process of just A&R. That is a natural process of you learning. And that kind of disappears, when you've basically got one person that's like, well, I made this tech house record and like it's finished. I decided it's finished.
It is. Yeah.
Where's your arbiter of quality? Like, did you try and get this on a label? No, it's on my own label. Right. So, would another label put this out? Would they press it to vinyl? If they wouldn't, then it's probably not good enough to go out. So you should be
So then reconsider the track.
Absolutely.
Not just like market it in a different way.
Right, but it's an absolutely different process now in terms of the way people release music and all that. So that's why that happens.
Definitely. Yeah, I think you spoke with Will Ranking about the hierarchy of music and about going into a record shop and having that moment of feeling like the tiny underdog giving a mini disc to somebody, and hoping that they wouldn't play it on the speakers when there was a big name in. So yeah, that hierarchy seems to have really got squashed now. Yeah,
it's gone essentially. It's gone, and like I said to him then, it's good in some ways because you want there to be this you want things to be accessible and approachable to people. You don't want to cut off education, you don't want to cut off learning, you don't want to cut off experiences for people just because they don't have money or they haven't been doing the thing as long as you have. You should want to share it to the best that you can. But the hierarchy for me was an essential part of knowing where you fitted in, basically, with record shops, with gigs. You had to pay your dues, basically. It's a classic kind of term that they use in like hip hop and stuff like that. It's like you've got to graft and like pay your dues. You got to be out there like hustling, selling your mixtape, or like whatever the equivalent of that is, going out to parties, meeting people, talking to them, kind of annoying them, just being in their ear. So like next time they're like, oh yeah, I know, yeah, of course I'll give this a listen, and it's just a constant process of sort of like work and communicating with people and kind of investing yourself into the thing that you want to be into. And that's kind of gone when somebody can just be like, send me that track or whatever the equivalent is,
Absolutely.
So that's kind of a bit sad, I think, because people don't, because there's like a joy in it too. It's like a joy in the fact that you kind of progressed rather than just being like you messaged someone and they gave you something, and that doesn't feel like it would sort of be rewarding to me.
Yeah, you feel like you have these milestones where you're like, that was the first time someone called me up and asked me for a track, or that was the first time I had a track pressed to vinyl. I guess those milestones probably feel good, and probably going back to what you said in the beginning about initially not having like a grand plan or like a specific thing that you wanted to do, you get to that next stage and start to see further and go, I want John Peel to play one of my records, or you start then having these specific objectives.
Yeah, and all the time you're learning, of course. So what you don't know all of the things at the beginning. You don't know what's going to transpire, and where your life is going to go, and what music you might be into, and what people you're going to meet and like what influence they might have on you and where you're going to live in the future and what influence that has on the music you make. Because the places I've lived in the world, like I've made different music to the music I make here. So I think it has an effect. You know, that's why you get this idea that like bands go, you know, and live for 4 months in like a forest in Scandinavia, and they just live in a studio and they just hold up there and they make this album and it sounds completely different from everything else they made. Or they go to like California and they, you know, they're out on the beach every day and like the sun's shining and they're like, oh, our album sounds like this now, or you know, sound. Exactly, and you know, there's a reason why artists and bands do that. There's a kind of, they talk about, well, I wanted to go, you know, go somewhere, a different environment, and get myself into a different headspace. It's like, well, you wouldn't need to do that if it wasn't going to have any effect on your music. You'd just be like, well, what's the point? I might as well just stay here because it's always going to sound the same. Because you know that by going there, it's going to change what you end up doing and what it sounds like and so on.
Absolutely. I mean, that was literally one of the questions I wanted to ask you about was, do you find that making music in different places changes like what you're making? And do you like making music on the move, for example? Do you have like a mobile setup that you can jot ideas down?
I've got some stuff. Yeah, I've got like a small, like, you know, keyboard and obviously a laptop and all that stuff. But I don't know. I'm kind of the mind that I think it can be cool to just get stuff going, but it's hard for me. I don't know how you would, unless you're really going to set things up, unless you're going to have a keyboard set up, even if it's a small like micro key or something, 25 key keyboard. If you're not going to do that, I would find it really difficult, especially if you're making musical stuff. Like if you're making, you know, kind of noisy sort of, I don't know, if you're making like weird glitchy electronica where you're just like cutting things up, or if you're doing, you know, kind of bass house, or if you're doing maybe techno, that doesn't really rely on much musical movement. It's kind of, you just got like a big kick drum and maybe like one bass note and then maybe like a lead or an arp or something. It's, you know, but if you're doing stuff that involves like Rhodes and a piano and, you know, and kind of like you're working with vocals. I like to have vocals in pretty much everything I do.
I did notice
to
that.
some extent, whether that's cut up stuff, whether it's whatever. I really like, I mean, I tend to really only want to play records that have got some kind of vocal hook or whatever in them. I tend to gravitate towards that more. And if you're doing something that's got a vocal, I mean, immediately you need to know what key it's in. So you need a keyboard, you know, unless you're going to kind of just thumb away at the like, at the built-in keyboard in Logic or whatever.
Yeah,
and that doesn't
which
really,
is not velocity sensitive.
Yeah, and you know, it's kind of that's frustrating for me to work with. So I guess if you're doing kind of, you know, it might be cool to get like drums going, like especially within Machine, or if you're doing more kind of sample-based stuff where you're just kind of looping like a disco groove or whatever, all that stuff can work great. But I tend not to do stuff like that all the time. So, you know, that's why I don't tend to do loads of stuff on the road. And if I am travelling somewhere, generally I'm sorting out my music for that gig or whatever.
I see.
So that's kind of how I use that time. You know, if you've got like a 3-hour train to Sheffield, you think, well, that's probably enough time to sort out music, make some playlists, tidy things up a bit, you know, look through things. So you kind of start to get a sense of like, well, okay, I definitely want to play these things, and, you know, refreshing your memory about, okay, I've forgotten, what does that actually sound like? Oh yeah, it's that one. Okay, right, cool, I like that. And, you know, so I tend to use it for that more than making music.
Going back to the influences, did you have sort of early in your career, did you have any mentors or teachers or people that really influenced and inspired you?
Well, there was a guy, as I mentioned him earlier, Quantum, a guy called Andy. He was a drum and bass DJ, and he was sort of good friends with a friend of mine, Mark. And he worked in the record shop, HVR, and he had a show on the radio. It was called Surf at the time, which is now Juice 107.2. It was called Surf 107.2 at the time. And it was kind of like a new legal station, and there was a bunch of people on there. They kind of had like local DJs who were kind of doing things, you know. So if you were kind of a name, there was a kind of well-known DJ locally, then you might have had a a show on this station. So he did a drum and bass show on a Friday night or something, 10 till 12 or whatever. And obviously he worked in a record shop. He ran a club night called Steppers Convention, which was a huge deal down here at the time. They even did a broadcast. Radio 1 did a broadcast of one of their events and stuff. So it was pretty successful. And he really helped us because he kind of saw that we were really enthusiastic and that we kind of were pretty good for our age and that we knew what we were doing and we were doing it for the right reasons. And so he really helped us. And then I kind of got into, when I started getting into, I met Matt Jamlamont, I got into garage, met Matt. Matt's helped me a lot over the years with advice and kind of like, you know, contacts, and I've done a lot of remixes with him.
Absolutely, yeah.
And we've remixed people like, you know, All Saints, Alicia Dixon, Craig David, the Wide Boys, tons of other people. So that's all kind of been through him, really. And I mean, when I was about 10 years ago, I used to go and sort of live with him during the week, basically. So he had a studio at his place, so I would go up on a Monday and stay till a Thursday or Friday, and we'd just make tracks or whatever. And so we did that. I probably did that for about a year. I was living in Brighton at the time, but I would just commute for the week basically, and then come back and DJ at the weekends and stuff.
Cool.
So that was cool. MJ Cole's kind of become a good friend over the years. You know, sort of more gradually. I've done a couple of remixes for him.
Yes, I did. I really liked the remix you did
Of Undo.
Yes, that one was really good.
Yeah, it's for his new label 892. I'm actually working on another one for Soak It Up, which is kind of not a priority for him or me, but it's just like there's something there bubbling away, and at some point I'll kind of finish it and give it to him. But yeah, so you know, he's kind of like we chat a bit sometimes, and if I'm in London and he's around, we'll sort of meet up and have some like sushi or whatever, you know. And so that's great because I mean, like as you can see behind, I've got the MJ Cole signed album thing that he signed for me.
That's
and
cool.
So like he was probably my favourite producer growing up. When I got to sort of 18, and I was really getting into garage. And Sincere came out, and sort of even the earlier stuff on VIP that he was doing, kind of on also the engineering stuff for Ramsey and Fenn, which was like 97, 98. It was sort of just leaving school then. There was something about his sort of like musicianship that just stood out an absolute mile to me. There was like this sophistication to his productions.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
And obviously because of his musical background, and that's kind of what I aspired to be, really. That's kind of what my benchmark was. Like, I want to make an MJ Cole record, you know, musical, clean sounding, really beautiful vocals, and you know, and I kind of really appreciated the way that he went about making music and what his kind of ethos was. So he's somebody that's, you know, he hasn't maybe not been a mentor directly, but he's been a big influence on kind of the way I view the quality of stuff and kind of the musicianship of stuff. So that's cool. And then I'm trying to think who else really. They would be the main ones, but
you've also worked with a guy called Max Footwork. You've done a few
couple
of bits with him.
Yeah, he's Canadian. He's a Canadian friend of mine. We just got connected through Facebook. And he kind of was sending me stuff. You know, first of all, he was like, "Oh, I really like this thing you've done, great track, or whatever." And then we would kind of, you know, just have some sort of banter back and forth about the music business and what was going on at the time and whatever it might be. And so then we just sort of became friends. Really, I've never met him, never spent any time with him because he's in Canada.
Wow. He's
in Edmonton, I think. But you know, he would just send me these projects, and they were kind of like really, like, they were cool. And I was like, they're not quite there yet, but like, this is a basis. Like, what do you want to do? You know, shall we do something with it? Why don't you send me the idea, and then I'll flesh it out and mix it, and then we'll do some stuff. And we've actually got a few more ideas than other than the ones that came out. And there is plans to do something with them, but it's just, you know, like everything, finding time to do it.
Definitely.
But I really like his approach because he's just kind of he thinks he's not talented at all, but he is. And he obviously struggles with stuff, I guess, like we all do. And so I kind of like this idea of like saying to him, well, look, just send that to me. Just don't do anything else with it. Just send it to me and let me do the rest of it. And I can take a different approach because I'm kind of detached from it, because it's not, that bit of it's not mine.
Yes.
So I'm like, well, I'm going to leave that as it is because it sounds fine and it's kind of been committed to what it is. And I'll add some other stuff and we'll arrange it and mix it, and that's it, you know, and then it becomes a collaboration. So that's cool. It's a cool way to work rather than, you having to come up with everything. And then, you know, I'd kind of like to do that with some people, like give them 16 bars and say, now you turn that into a 6-minute record and do all the bits, and, you know.
Absolutely.
And they're kind of excited by it. They're not jaded by it like you might be, because you've like, well, I've heard this for 3 weeks now. You know, they're like, well, this is amazing. I want to do this. I'm going to do it now. I'm going to get it finished now. And there's something, again, about that energy of somebody else kind of driving you on, that if you were both sat in the room together, the bit that you don't want to do, or that you're like, oh, I don't really want to arrange it, I'm going outside for a cigarette if you smoke, or I'm going to get a beer or whatever, right?
Yeah.
You come back, the other person's arranged it, you know, because they're really excited by it. And so that's like a good reason to collaborate and kind of get in the same space. And it's a shame that we do less and less of that now, especially with singers and stuff too, because everybody's in different places in the world. And you know, years ago you could never do that. It was like, hey, you know, Michael Watford's coming in from America, and like, he's only here for 4 days, right, we better get him in then. That was how it worked. It wasn't like, well, I'll send you the file and you can write to it.
And floppy disk with the samples.
Exactly, it was it. You've got to be there. You've got to be there, and that was how it was done. And so there's definitely a benefit and a kind of a sort of nice energy that comes from having other people around you, or other people that maybe can pick up the slack and kind of do the things that you don't want to do.
Definitely.
Because the moment you start kind of having to do stuff you don't want to do, that doesn't really move you, is when you start to get friction against yourself, you know.
And yeah, friction, I guess, against the flow of making music.
Yeah.
Dance music has always been, I think you described it as a counterculture.
Yes.
Like electronic music in general is always like counterculture. I remember as a group of friends, we would always talk about things being underground. We wanted it to be underground. We wanted music that we were playing to be underground. We wanted... Yeah, we weren't interested in like a commercial side of it at all. Do you think selling out now is different to what it was 20, 30 years ago?
Maybe, yeah, because I think for me it's about intention, right? So, you know, first of all, I don't really care about people selling out. I don't really care what they choose to make, and you know, the only thing I would say is that again, it comes back to sort of intention and authenticity, right? So what is your intention behind making this piece of music? If your intention is just to make a good record and that's how it comes out, and the record ends up doing really, really well, and you get on top of the pops, or you get, you know, a #1, or you get an Ivor Novello nomination, or a Grammy like Camel Fat nomination like Camel Fat did. They didn't make the record with that intention. They made the record with just the intention of, let's make a cool club track that's kind of got like a vibey vocal on it, and, you know, some good production, and that's it. Like that's it. It's a thing. They weren't like, well, if we do this, we might get a Grammy nomination. Like, I don't know anybody that thinks like that. I'm not saying there aren't people. I know it's in the back of people's minds. Probably when Kanye West makes something, he's like, I'm going to get nominated for a Grammy for this. But obviously he's much closer to that anyway on a daily basis than all of us are, because he's already really, really well known. So for them to get it is kind of even more exceptional, even though they didn't win it. But I don't think you make things with that intention. It's different if you decide that, you know, you're doing something to be as cheesy as possible with the intention of, like, you know, I don't know, getting it on the radio or whatever it is you're going to do, because probably that won't work, because then, you know, unless you're going down some really strange road of, like, you're trying to appeal to particular people, I think it has to be natural to you as well. Some people just sit and they make like really commercial music naturally. Yeah. Like they make something melodically that's like really easy to latch onto, and then they want to work with, because that's just what appeals to them. They grew up listening to pop music, or they go out and listen to that stuff, and that's what moves them. And for other people, that's not what moves them. They're like, no, I want stuff that's kind of like a bit dirty and a bit gritty, and, you know, it's got more energy to it, or it's faster. Yeah. You know, I don't like all this house stuff. It's too slow for me. I only like drum and bass. That's the energy. That's the energy level that I want. You know, and so there's a reason that these things resonate with people, and maybe they're not all completely understood, but it's a feeling, right? Literally, you know, house is a feeling, as the saying goes. And so it's the same for everything else. It's the same for drum and bass. It's the same for trance. It's the same for hip hop. It's like, it's just something that resonates with you, and that connects with you, and that you connect with.
I wonder whether, if you say like, right, we're going to try and win a Grammy with this record, more than likely, in my opinion, you're probably going to tarnish that track, because you're sort of discounting the track as being the primary thing. The primary thing is like, obtain attention in this location.
It's like cynical, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's cynical. You're kind of placing the value of like recognition of kind of like your need to basically be recognised or reach a certain milestone above the actual piece of art itself. And so of course then you circle back and get into all these discussions about, like, is the artist's intention important when making a piece of art? Does that affect how we feel about it? And that's all kind of like, PhD level sort of musicology stuff. But
loads of abstract ideas.
About exactly, about like, well, what is, what does this thing mean, and how do we define this area of music? And like I say, like, does the artist's intention mean anything to the listener? You could argue it doesn't, because they put their own meaning onto it, and and all the rest of it. So I don't know if you have to be. I think selling out is different now in a way, in the sense that there's a lot more visibility for a lot more music now. I think there's a lot more platforms that deliver music now. You don't have to, like years ago, you had to make a very conscious decision to consume music. You had to go out and buy that CD or that record. You had to go to the record shop, HMV, or your local shop, or whatever it was,
MVC, Woolworths,
and you had to buy it. You had to choose, I'm going to go into this place and listen to this thing and purchase it, buy the whole album, and I'm going to go home and then I'm going to listen to the whole album start to finish. And you kind of had this connection to it because you were invested in it more, because you'd made a choice to buy it. Now you can listen to a playlist on Spotify and you might know the first 3 records and really want to listen to them, but then after that you might start doing your gardening or start cleaning the house, and tracks 4 to 50 you have no idea what they are, but you're just allowing that playlist to run. They call that a lean back experience, right? The idea that you're consuming it but it's passive. So there's people that are number 4, 5 and 6 on that playlist that might have millions of streams, but you have no idea who they are. Right? So when they come to town and do a concert, you're not going to see it because you haven't consumed their art in a way that connected with you. It was like just on thing. Whereas years ago that wasn't the case. If you went and bought a CD from the shop, you knew which CD you were buying. Oh, I'm buying Wu-Tang. Oh, I'm buying All Saints. Oh, I'm buying... It didn't just accidentally end up in your bag. And you were just like, oh, what's this? I'll put it on, right?
Accidentally got load of this playlist of CDs.
And now consumers are creators, right? Consumers are also creators. So we are, filtering things on our phone, doing Snapchat and, augmented reality. We're adding text to things. We're making videos and uploading them, even on a consumer level. So consumers are creators in the similar way we're doing playlists on Spotify. Because now people are like, well, I'm a music fan, but now I'm almost a DJ because I'm sharing this playlist with people of like, this is my getting ready to go out playlist. This is my, Sunday, come down playlist, or whatever it might be. So there's all of that going on now. So it means there's much more ways in which you can consume music. There's more avenues for it. And you can you can get 1 million streams on Spotify. I'm not saying it's easy, but with the right promotion and, certain things going on, you can get 1 million streams fairly easily. It's not inconceivable that an independent artist can get that. But if you think about the equivalent of what that means, to get 1 million plays of your record 30 years ago would have been insane, because it would have. Where were you going to get it played?
Conscious decisions to purchase,
or either on record, or either on the radio, or a DJ playing it in a club, or at a concert. As in you performing your own song, or what else? Those are really the only ways, or someone buying the CD or single or whatever. So to get 1 million plays of that was a very different thing. Whereas now it's like, it's free essentially, so people will just play and play and play and play and play, and that's great. But so I think it means different things now. I don't know if selling out is the same concept that it was, but I think as well, to go back to where you originally started with that, when you're young, you're really protective of the underground. Like you're really protective of that culture that you're a part of.
Patriotic too.
And it does like almost disgusts you. They're like, oh god, that is just so commercial, or I would never go to that bar or club or whatever, because it's so the kind of antithesis of like everything that you sort of love and represent, and the idea that, again, people are going out actively to consume the music that they want, rather than just being told, well, you're going to this bar and we're going to play you the top 40 and that's what you're going to like. And that's why there's the idea of it being a counterculture, because it's a drug culture. It's a punk culture, essentially. And so all these people that you meet, they're all kind of the same as you. you know, they're into this different lifestyle. They don't want to work a full-time job. So for those reasons, I say it's like a counterculture. They're all creative. They kind of feel restrained by the normal, quote, normal world. The idea that you have to get up every morning and go to work for somebody that doesn't really care about you, you know, and you're doing some mundane job that you think doesn't add any value to the world. You want to do something that creates happiness, that brings happiness in the sense of, oh, I made this thing and now it's out in the world. And I think there's an element of that. And so a lot of people that you meet in these environments and in clubs and, you know, in this business, or certainly the friends that I've made over the years and the people that I've met and the experiences I've had have all been like that. They've all been kind of countercultural, or sort of like, you know, some people might say they're sort of like hippies, or you know, do you know what I mean? Because like in some senses they are. Yeah, they're like no, it's like, yeah, they're like no, fuck that. I'm not going to do that. I'd rather be broke and be doing what I want. You know, that money isn't important or less important to them, and there's all that thing. It's like they want to have these amazing experiences on drugs and go out with their friends and travel and explore and sort of have these transcendent moments. And you know, and for all of those reasons, that's why I say it's like I think it's like a counterculture. You know, because you continue to meet these people and everybody's got a story. You know, and I like that, and I think that's kind of a bit more. I think it's more the way we're supposed to be as a species, right? But we've kind of like, you know, we exist in these very kind of tight, like, sort of lines of like, well, you go and you get a job and you do that, and that's, you know, that's the sensible thing to do. And you know, none of you are like, yeah, we're all individuals, but only within a certain parameter. Like,
yeah, don't cross the.
You have the right to express yourself, but not too much. And obviously, music and art is a way of completely throwing off those shackles. So that's why I think it's, you know, it's been as important to me as it has over the years.
Yeah, it's a very good point. That the I guess like what you're expected to do in your life and the restraints that you're meant to stay in. Yeah, like the music scene can shift those, and you can be what you want to be, and you can break the rules with making music. You can do that, can't you? And that feels fun, and that's exciting.
I think as well, historically, music's been a powerful force in terms of what it's actually done for, you know, minorities, for historically oppressed people, so black people, gay people, transgender people. They would all need a safe space, right? Which has obviously got a negative connotation now. But the reality that these people could go somewhere where they were accepted, and so for those reasons, it's always been powerful. And even before that, you know, it was a way of slaves having solidarity, singing together, you know, creating music, maintaining morale, and so you know, and obviously more recently, so people find these ways of, you know, and even before that, you'd have people sitting around a campfire, you know, passing on folk songs. And so it's this idea of sort of community and this idea of sort of acceptance, and this idea that it allows you to kind of express yourself in a way, and maybe in a world and in a place and an environment that within a world that doesn't really want you to do those things, and you're doing it in an environment where it is accepted. And so for those reasons, it's obviously powerful. But yeah, I think that's why, again, another reason why I would consider it to be countercultural.
Yeah, you talked about a perfect storm, about garage like changing, and I wanted to ask you about music in general throughout your career. How has the sort of the scene shifted and like genres combined?
Well, I think that the drum and bass and jungle thing obviously has remained sort of pretty solid throughout, even though it's not something I really listen to anymore. I still obviously have a big affinity with all the records that were kind of around at the time when we were going out and stuff, and all the old kind of hardcore jungle, kind of 1994, 1995, kind of like rave, what you consider sort of rave stuff. And then garage kind of sort of took over for me about 99, 2000, and I was into it. I'm still into it now, but I was into it kind of just doing that pretty much exclusively till about 2006. And there wasn't really a scene then. After 2002 to 2006, there wasn't really a scene. That was when everything kind of just, slid away, and there was loads of trouble, and it kind of became like a very dirty word. People weren't using the word garage, and people weren't getting remixes done. There was no gigs really. There was a few people that survived, like EZ, Matt Jam Lamont, MJ Cole still did pretty well. So those people, I guess, that you'd kind of expect, but only like the very, very top tier of acts were doing well. And then it kind of came back around. I mean, I kind of moved on to making house about 2007 or something like that. Started trying to get into doing that. I guess that garage for me came back around Disclosure time really. There was a few people kind of putting garage influences into their productions, and Disclosure obviously were kind of a major part of that, because they were kind of very open about the fact, we love garage and we like Jay Dilla and these are our influences. And then a few people started to kind of put those influences back, as I say, and then there was kind of the whole like sort of UK deep house thing that was going on. It was kind of like, it wasn't really deep house at all. It was kind of like square basses, kind of garagey, Disclosure-y, skippy sort of stuff. But it's been great since then really, because basically now there's loads of people kind of doing garage again. MJ Cole's kind of doing loads of remixes again for like Dua Lipa and all these kind of big pop artists. There's garage festivals now, 51st State, there's a Garage Nation festival, so it's kind of back in that way.
Is it you were talking about cycles of things coming and going? Do you think it's like,
I think things do move in cycles. Yeah, I think it's it's a new sound for people essentially, and right now the disco thing is back. Everybody's kind of obsessed with disco again now, sampling disco records, techno and disco put together. Glitterbox is kind of, just going absolutely like stellar. They've got, High, which is the old space in Ibiza. They're doing that every Friday, and it's basically just, playing music that's 25, 30 years old, as well as some new stuff. It's all kind of classic house, disco, modern kind of disco edits, all that sort of stuff. But people are writing, gospel. There's kind of people writing gospel-y kind of disco stuff, or gospel soulful house stuff again. So that's cool. So that's great. But yeah, there are cycles to it, and you never really quite know exactly why people get into it again. Maybe it's one record that just sparks it, and they're like, oh, I kind of like this stuff. And then a couple of other producers think, oh, I want to do something like that. And then before you know where you are, you've got like a little small nucleus of, oh, these are like 10 tracks that have kind of all got the same vibe right now. And so that leads to kind of, a few more magazines picking it up and talking about it, and then it becomes like a thing, becomes kind of a movement then.
Yeah, it was weird also, you did mention Azido DeBase Doom's Night as being like a crossover record.
Yeah. And
that's sort of an example of chaos theory, isn't it? Because how that sort of... It was probably one of those records that helped bring garage to the mainstream, but it wasn't even a garage record. It was just something that was able to hit loads of buttons across just at some
there's
the right time.
Sometimes there's records not just that get adopted by the garage scene, but there's sometimes records that just cross over because they just appeal to everybody. They have this kind of magic like dust that isn't intended when they make the record, but it just has something. And a house DJ listens to it and thinks, I can play that. A garage DJ listens to it and thinks the same thing. A breakbeat DJ listens to it and thinks the same thing. Techno DJ thinks, I can play that. Yeah. And so it just has this appeal where everybody ends up playing it. And so, of course, the more people in more scenes you've got playing that record, the bigger the record's going to be. And there's kind of some other examples of that, like Gabrielle is another example of that. It's not really a garage record, it's a house record. But the kind of mix, because of the sort of the rhythm of the drum programming, it feels like kind of two-steppy, right? And so because it's got this like really emotional, yearning kind of vocal and this really great music, it's just become a timeless track. You've got things like I'm a Good Man by Martin Solveig. There's a Moose T kind of breakbeat mix, right? But you'll hear house DJs play that, breakbeat DJs play it, garage DJs play it. Kind of soul and funk DJs will play it because it's kind of live sounding and it's got that kind of funk element to it. So again, that's one of those tracks that just crosses over.
I guess double RIP Groove by Double 99 was another one that you'd hear techno people playing. It was just such a great track that it just hit the spot at the right time. Yeah,
I wonder. I'm not sure if at the time it came out it was. I mean, obviously it did very well, and I think it charted and everything. But I don't know if now. I don't know if, for example, if techno DJs would have played it then. But they'll play it now because it's kind of like retro, right? And it's kind of like a classic now, and they can make sense of it. So sometimes it doesn't happen with the record at the time. Like garage DJs would have played it for sure. I don't know if house DJs would have played it. You see, because it's a little bit too aggressive and a bit too, it really only works as a garage record in terms of its kind of attitude.
Yes, it's quite.
But now house DJs would probably play it because it's become kind of almost a club classic. Techno DJs will play it because they'll drop like random bits of kind of garage into their sets and stuff like that. So sometimes it happens with the record at the moment and it just naturally goes everywhere. But sometimes it takes the record to be kind of respected for a while and kind of get its place in sort of culture before people start referencing it back again and playing it again at a later point.
It's such a great track that I don't know why, but it's that the vocal that sort of loops in the background that just plays the whole way through.
It's Tina Moore, isn't it?
Is it?
It's Never Gonna Let You Go.
Oh,
yeah,
right,
it's a section from that. But that EP, I think it wasn't even intended to be a serious record. It was basically like kind of, they were like, well, just put it on there as a third track. We don't think like it will do anything. And it ended up becoming the biggest record and their biggest record. But of course it was Tim Deluxe and Omar. But it's interesting when you hear these stories about kind of the inception of sort of records. It's just like, well, we just put it out on a B-side of something. We just we needed another track to fill it, and we just thought, oh, that would do. But like where the bass was too loud or the vocal was too loud, but we were just like, oh, don't worry, we'll put it out. And that becomes the thing. And it was like, oh no, I like the way the bass is really loud. And that becomes kind of a whole thing. And you're like, oh, we did that by accident, and so you had all those kind of moments. As well.
I do like one thing I've always loved is like the elements that are within garage records, like how hard the sounds are, like the kicks and the snares are always like as punchy as you can possibly get them. The bass lines are always huge, like big square wavy basses and pitch bends and things. And also the like all of the string sounds, they're like general MIDI sounds, aren't they? They're not like it doesn't sound like an orchestra. It sounds like a sound card from a computer in the 90s which is generating them, but that was that sound that it had.
I mean, I think the garage essentially was always a club scene, so that's why the records were made the way they were. There wasn't really any, I mean, you had a few people doing what you might consider like kind of radio garage, right? Like Artful Dodger were kind of doing songs, right? And their stuff's kind of quite light and sort of R&B, kind of more like kind of light radio R&B, but at a garage tempo. That's kind of how I look at their stuff. But mostly it was a club scene. So if you wanted to get your stuff played, it had to be quite heavy because people were going out to it. And so a natural sort of evolution of that basically is the fact that if you want people to play your music in clubs, it has to stand up in clubs. And there was, obviously there was pirate radio and stuff like that, but people were really just playing club music on pirate radio. That's why the garage scene became as popular as it was, because people were listening to this stuff at home and being like, God, this is going to sound so good in a club. Like you made you feel like you were in a club already, like the vibe of it, it was like exciting. It wasn't like listening to a radio record and being like, well, this is a radio record, and that's why there was like dubs, and that's why there was big bass lines, and that's why there was kind of like ragga vocals and MC vocals, and all of those things were really about the fact that it came from a club environment, when it was kind of 4/4 garage, and then obviously two-step came along, but it was essentially the same thing. And I was into like kind of heavy stuff. I was into like Sovereign, Steve Gurley, MJ Cole stuff, although it was musical, was always like weighty, always had like a weight to it. LB, like Groove Chronicles, all those types of things. I wasn't really into the like tippy-tappy sort of, I loved Artful Dodger. But then again things start to evolve. Someone's like, well, why don't we want to do songs on top of this, so we have to make it a bit lighter and put a guitar in it and make it a bit more musical, and and if you're good enough, you find a way to kind of do all those things, and tick those boxes. And they were never interested in, and it depends where you come from, doesn't it? Like if you're into going out in clubs and you're like what you could say you're a club kid, like you're going to make music that's heavy. if you're a musician and you've grown up playing the guitar and listening to, bands and stuff, you're not going to be like, no, the kick's not heavy enough. You're not going to have that conversation with yourself, because you're just going to be like, well, this is my drum groove, and this is my guitar, and this is my song over the top. It's a song.
That is how those instruments are.
That's how that works.
Yeah.
You're not like, well, this is not going to sound good in a club, and you're like, well, it's not meant to be played in a club. I made it because I want to get it on the radio, and I want it to be an album song and things like that. Then again, that's where the remix comes in, right? Someone's like, well, we need you to take this and make it a club version. Okay, cool. And then it takes it into a different area. So that's what's great about a scene. It starts to develop and people get their own ideas about, like, well, I want to kind of take it there, and I want to get it on the radio, and I want to do songs. I want to do this thing, but I want to put vocals on it. Okay, cool. Let's see how that works, and then you get someone else and things splinter off and kind of cross-pollinates, and that's what keeps things moving, keeps things exciting, but also kind of eventually leads sort of potentially to the death of it, because it gets splintered and people end up doing other things, and there isn't always enough to sustain that original thing.
I guess it either sort of dissipates, like you say, it goes in all different directions, or alternatively everyone keeps doing the same exact thing and it sort of stagnates and no one's got any new ideas. But in terms of, you made a good point about remixes before, in that it's like a medium. Only in music can you like remix something. Like you referenced the Mona Lisa. It's not like an artist could reinvent the Mona Lisa and it would stand alongside the Mona Lisa.
Right.
So it's a beautiful thing that's in music, that you can do these things, isn't it? Like have a remix of a seminal track and do your own version of it. Yeah.
There's not. I think that there are no other art forms where that concept exists. The idea
really
of you
cool.
do your own version of this thing. And Will made the point about comedy. You don't stand up at a comedy event and say, right, I'm going to do this Ricky Gervais joke, but I've added some bits to it to remix it and make it my own. You just copied it then.
I'm just going to do the Tommy Cooper stand up for half an hour.
Yeah, but you can say,
throw in a couple of my own jokes.
Exactly, but you might say, but I didn't like the way that Tommy did this, or I thought he took too long to get to that bit, so I've shortened it, right? Like, I don't like, it's like the equivalent of saying, well, I really like this record, but it takes 3 minutes to get going. I'm going to make it happen in a minute. Right, that's like a remix. But it's like saying, look, instead of doing the monologue, I'm just going to cut that bit out and I'm just going to go straight into the comedy, straight to the drop or whatever. But you don't do that. You don't do that, right? That's the punchline, right? But you don't do that in any other art form. You don't do it in, you can copy things, you can, parody things, you do satire, you can pastiche things or whatever. But you don't do a painting and you're like, well, this is like Sunflowers by Van Gogh. This is my version. Well, no, but you're like, but you didn't do it first. It's like, this is not your painting.
That is not valid.
Yeah, but like I remixed it. I moved the bits around and like my version
upside down and like
my version is going to open it up to a different audience, and so and it should stand alongside. Like I demand that you put it in the Tate Gallery alongside the. They'd just be like, well, no, that concept doesn't exist. So
they just call security.
Yeah, absolutely. So the fact that you get to do that is a really cool thing.
It is good, yeah.
And has the effect of basically opening it up to different audiences, which is what the point of the remix kind of was. I think initially it started off as a remix, right? Like, it was basically someone just adjusting the levels and maybe adjusting the arrangement a bit. Like, I want this chorus to double and I want the string section to be longer because that's the bit where everyone's got their hands in the air. And so that was kind of what, instead of the DJ doing it live, you could remix it in the studio. So you had that 9-minute version with the like big euphoric breakdown and loads of more percussion and all of that.
Loads of crowd noise.
Exactly. And then since then it's become a tool for opening up that record to different areas of the market, basically. So like, well, hey, look, this is a weird, indie record, but what about if we wanted to get house DJs to play it? Well, you'd have to get house mix done. Okay. And then you go to somebody who's got expertise in that field to say, if I gave you this, what would you have to do with it to make people dance to it in a house club? Okay, cool, I know. And then I'll take that bit or I'll strip that bit away and, and that's what the art of the remix is.
You've prolifically remixed throughout the years. You've done loads of remixes for some huge artists. So what is your approach to remixing? What's your approach when you're sort of sent one to do?
Well, I sort of it depends really. I basically I have to kind of like the track somewhat, or I have to think there's something I can do with it. It's harder to do that with house tracks because they're already house tracks. I'd rather, I was saying before, I'd rather get some stuff that is not house to start with. Then it gives you a lot more scope to go somewhere with it. And recently I've been doing more kind of deep jazzier stuff. So people are kind of, the thing is, once you have a couple of records that do well, people know you for those, and then they come to you and they want you to do something that's in that style.
Yeah, that blueprint that you.
Yeah, they're like, oh, we really like this thing that you did, and so can you make it kind of like that? And you're like, okay, cool. And if you're in that zone, you're like, and maybe it makes sense for that thing. Maybe the vocal is really jazzy, so you're like, well, yes, it makes sense that I would do that in this style. But sometimes they kind of want you to like shoehorn stuff into a style that doesn't really work. So that can be a bit of a challenge. Sometimes, I'm trying to be really much more selective about the remixes I'm doing now, because I've done a lot over the years, and unless people are really going to pay me, really good money for certain things, then I'm kind of trying to, or I really, really want to do them for various reasons, because they're either a great song, or it's for a really good label, or it's got some other benefit to it. Then I'm trying to sort of move away from doing quite so many, because I'd like to do more original stuff. I'd like to write more songs and do things like that. Yeah. And they just take up so much time. I've usually got at least like 3 remixes basically to do at any time.
That's brilliant.
Kind of pretty much consistently. And that's great, but it does mean that you're kind of always, I'll start this thing next week, or this person wants to do a song with you, or you're talking to this person, get a demo done, but that's going to be a week or 2 away, or maybe 3, and then you've got gigs in between, and it's really hard now to manage everything. Mm-hmm. To do it all yourself, to do all your remixes, all your production, because being creative is not an exact science. It's like Definitely. Some days you'll sit there and it doesn't happen, but you still have to get things done. And then you might think, well, like, I've only got today, and then tomorrow I go away for 3 days to Barcelona or to Berlin or to Ibiza or whatever it is, and then you know that you're not going to be back in the studio until Tuesday, let's say. Then you're already into the next week, and you might have something else due, and mm-hmm. within that you've still got to keep collecting music, buying music, listening to promos, making sure that you're, as a DJ, doing your job as well.
Yes.
As well as then, trying to learn something. Oh, I've got this new synth and I want to learn it, right? Mm-hmm. So that is really like half a day of messing around, or a few hours messing around. It's not always time that you have. As well as now, on top of that, doing social media, doing videos, being active online, doing DJ mixes, all of these things. It's really, really hard now to do it all by yourself. So that's a challenge. But so yeah, with regards to remixes, I'm trying to take less of them going forward, and this year I have done. But in terms of my approach, I'll basically look at where the vocal really takes me, kind of what feeling I get from it, and where I think it fits best. I will sometimes send a label something that they can like completely different to what they're expecting, and hope that they like it. Mm-hmm. I do say to them, if you hate it, tell me, and I'll keep it for myself and do something else with it, and I'll do another version for you. Yeah. But let me know, and most of the time, 9 times out of 10, they're like, no, I really like it. Even if it's not what they were expecting, they're still happy with it.
Oh, that's good.
So that's a good thing. But yeah, that's sort of my approach really. I'm trying to be a lot more sort of specific now in terms of the things I ask for, in terms of parts. You have to have good parts. People send you rubbish. You spend time cleaning up vocals, and it's like you're not really getting paid for that. So you're doing all of that with the idea that it's going to be a better end product with your name on it, but you kind of don't want to do all that stuff. And then the deadlines, you're going to be very set on the deadlines. If a label says to you, we need it back in 4 weeks, or we need it back in 3 weeks or 2 weeks, and you're like, well, I can't do that, it's a 4-week turnaround. Mm-hmm. I always make sure I get paid up front for all my remixes, because I just don't want to chase people for money. Mm-hmm. I've done it too much over the years. You do something for somebody, you're really pleased with it, and then 3 months later that you're still waiting for them to pay you. Yep. And then they tell you they're not going to put it out, and then it comes out, and you're kind of in this whole thing. So now the way I work is just like, look, I understand it might be difficult for you, but the way I work is this. I'm busy, I've got a lot of offers to do them. If you would like me to do a mix, these are my terms.
Brilliant.
And pay the money up front, basically. And I find that kind of works.
Position.
Yeah, I find it works for me. It works simpler. It means that the person knows they're going to get the thing back from me within the agreed time frame. I then feel good about that project because I know that, well, they've already paid me, so there's an effort on my side to get the thing done on time. Definitely. Rather than just be like, because people come to you and they say, oh, can you do an EP for our label? And I'm like, yeah, but you're not offering me anything, so it's not a priority. Like, if I have 2 tracks that suit you in the next few months, I'll tell you, and I'll give them to you and we can discuss it.
Yeah.
But you're not going to jump to the top of my list. Like, don't expect that you will. And I understand that you don't, they might be like, well, we just don't pay advances up front. Okay, cool, that's no problem. But I also won't prioritise working on a project like that.
Yeah,
because something else will come in.
Voluntary work for you.
Yeah, and I'm sure I'll get something out of it at the end when the record sells, or we will get an advance sorted out once I give them a product. But I'm like, you're asking me to create something for you. You're commissioning me to do it. So if you're commissioning me to do it, you should pay me now. Mm-hmm. That's how commissioning works. It isn't just this weird sort of arbitrary sort of ad hoc idea that, like, I'll make something for you out of the goodness of my heart because you asked me today. It's different if I make a thing off my own back and I send it to you and say, what do you think? Does this work for you? Yeah, it does. Absolutely, okay, cool. Yeah. That's different because you didn't ask me to do it, but you're asking me to create a thing specifically for your label with you in mind. So it's got to be suited to you. Mm-hmm. It's not like I have a bunch of 10 tracks and I can give them to whoever. That work's already done. Yeah. It's a small, subtle difference, but it's like if you're commissioning somebody to do something, I think you should say, well, I'm going to give you something as an incentive to do it then. Because otherwise, it's not going to be a priority. I'd rather do other things. I'd rather work on demos for Defected or grand plans or my own label stuff or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the way I tend to work. But trying to get that across to everybody in a really nice, polite way that facilitates dialogue and good conversation and keeps a good energy around, because I think I'm an easy person to deal with and I want to be sort of seen that way. But the danger of that, again, with no hierarchy, is that people just sort of, well, I want you to do this thing, and they don't understand sort of why you don't want to do it, and then, sorry, that's not really how it works. Like, come to Nevada and play. Well, it's not really how it works, mate. Like, I'm not just going to be there on the off chance and then decide to just drop in and DJ for you.
There's no other gigs planned.
There's a reason why the infrastructure and the ecosystem works the way it does. Like, if for me to go somewhere, there has to be like, how would that even really work? Like, let's say I went to like Milwaukee, right? I just bowled up there and decided, I'm here for 3 days on a holiday. Then I'll call up every promoter or every person I know in Milwaukee and say, hey, what have you got going on? They're like, well, nothing, because like I can't promote a party on 2 days' notice. Oh, right, well, but you said to let you know when I'm here, and I'm here. So what's going on? They're like, well, nothing. I'm like, well, do you see what I mean? You see immediately how this just doesn't work.
Yeah, it needs to be formulated, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Like, plans need to be laid.
Yeah, that's how people put on parties, right? Like, you need a venue, you need to promote it, you need money to pay for things. Like, you can't spring that on somebody, after 2 days.
Yeah.
Within 2 days. So I think, it's those little things that people don't realise.
Mm-hmm. But I guess you're in a good position. You're in a good position in that you can pick and choose which ones you do now, and the pitfalls of going into a contract with somebody, and you've probably got a lot of experience in doing that.
Yeah, I think as well, as you kind of get more experience and you do more things, you're looking for more from a project. You're not really looking to just get paid, whereas that can be cool, but for me now, I'm at a point in my career where everything's got to be really good, and I'm looking for everything I do to kind of do something for me, and so it's cool to work with smaller labels and help people get going, and I've done loads of that. People are like, I'm starting this label and I'd really love to get you on a remix, and sort of like you discuss money with them and you discuss these things with them and help them promote it and tell them, well, this is sort of the way I think you should do it if you want to get the best success. And so you're kind of like mentoring in people as well and kind of giving them advice, and people are asking you for feedback and all this kind of stuff that sort of comes with the territory. But there does reach a point where, for example, if you've got management where they say, well, you're just not going to work for that label because they're not big enough.
Yeah.
You need to work. You need to be on a label that's going to do as much for you, if not more, as you are for them. Otherwise, the transaction's not there. Yes, that label might be paying you, but there's a perception. This business is all about perception now.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
the labels that you're perceived that you're on is a perception of what size you are as an artist. And so whilst I love doing the smaller label stuff and helping people out, and I've done loads of it over the years, I'm kind of at a point now where I'm sort of having to be like, how do you say that to somebody? It's really hard. How do you say, well, your label's not important enough for me? You're kind of trying to approach it in a way where it's like, yeah, you can say I don't have time, or you can kind of go down that road, but you are getting to a point where you're like, well, every label I be on has to increase the perception of me as a valuable artist, right?
Definitely.
And every artist you remix has got to be, like, you get to a point where it's like, you look at these big acts, they're not remixing for unknowns, they're remixing the Sinead Harnets, the Disclosures of the world. That's what you do. Your management strategically chooses, yeah, we'll do that.
We'll
do that Diplo remix. Yeah, we'll do that. Rihanna remix. Yeah, we'll do that. Or whoever's, Jessie Ware or whoever it is. And that's. But I guess the great thing about them is they have those conversations, not you. So everything goes to them, and they say to the labels, or that's not the direction he's looking to go in at the moment, or he doesn't have time, or whatever. But obviously when it's you and you're running your own business and doing your own thing, it's harder to have those conversations all the time.
Yeah, and I guess you've got to be tactful with when you are dealing with small labels, because you don't want to piss on their fire if they're just starting out. But yeah, you have to be,
and you want to encourage people. You want to encourage people. I want people to spend money, to invest in what they're doing in their label, in mastering, and getting producers to do stuff, paying people for what they make, getting remixes done, putting on events. I want people to do all of that stuff because it's kind of it's conducive to like a good industry, and people, I think people should invest in themselves and in things that they believe in if that's what they're really passionate about.
And it's like the ecosystem of the industry.
And it's encouraging. People encouraged me when I was starting out. People have said keep going. Like, even MJ Cole is a good example. I sent him a CD when it was 2003. And I was just making a few kind of terrible records at the time, but like he was like, oh really? I did like a Coldplay bootleg, and EZ played it on Kiss and everything, and I sent it to him, and he was like, oh, I really like the Coldplay thing. He's like, the production wasn't quite there and everything. He's like, but you're onto something. That's a cool idea, to take this kind of guitar-y thing and do like kind of like a 4/4 garagey mix with it. I did that, and I was kind of sampling R&B stuff, and he was like, he was even like, I'll send you some vocals to have a play with. So it's kind of like, great. You can do a remix basically. He probably knew that it wouldn't come to anything, but so it's that kind of thing.
Yeah, even those small gestures I think mean a lot.
Exactly.
To you when you're moving
and
up,
you're excited by that. Your friends at the time, you're like, oh wow, my God, just got an email back off MJ Cole, like sent him a CD and he's to his studio and he's listening to it, and so it does give you encouragement. And so I'm careful not to be like that with people, but you do have to get the balance right between accessibility and kind of what you give people versus what they expect, and it's a difficult balancing act that I'm kind of not sure that I get right all the time. So
yeah, I think from what I've seen of you seem to be very well mannered, and not like not egotistical at all, very down to earth sort of person. So I imagine you deal with it very well.
I wonder though whether I'm a little bit too accessible. That's my only thing. I think I'm a little bit too available to people online, because I reply to everything. People always get replies from me. They always kind of get what they ask for in terms of like feedback on mixes and stuff. There's a few people where I don't do it, but mostly I'm very accessible. And I don't know. I think there's this idea of sort of supply and demand, right? If you it's like diamonds, right? You retard the supply so that they become more valuable.
Price goes up.
So if people just think you're accessible all the time, I wonder in this modern age of kind of like attention and everything and what that's worth, what that does for you in terms of how people see you. Because if I was too busy to just, if I was never on Facebook, or I was never on the socials and I didn't reply to emails for certain things that didn't interest me, and I just didn't even, someone comes to me about a remix, I reply to everybody. I never ignore people that are like, oh, can you do something for my label? And then I'll discuss it and go into why I can or can't, right? But I never just completely ignore them like they're worthless.
Delete.
Right? And that makes me feel good as a human being. As an artist, as a career perspective, what is that doing for me? And it's obviously hard to measure that either way, because you're never going to know about the things you didn't reply to. is a different path. But but people do say to me, I think you're a bit too accessible.
Right.
So
and
maybe that's the thing. But
that is an interesting way to look at it, isn't it? Because the music industry is changing, and I think from my point of view, the word enigma is key to quite a lot of stuff that happens. So like, the less you know about something, the more you want to know about it.
Well, yeah, like Prince when he was alive. He was like very mysterious, right?
Yeah.
Like Moody Man is like a modern example of that, right? Moody Man is this guy who's just got this like mad personality and makes these records and like does these
dreads.
talks. He's got like a big afro.
Oh, right.
He might have dreads now, but yeah, he did the Red Bull Music Academy talk and stuff. His voice has been sampled. But yeah, he's a prime example of that. You know, or when you see things on vinyl and you don't know who the producer is, you're like, oh, this is interesting. What's the story behind this, right? Whereas if it's just like you go somewhere and they've got all the socials and they've got their life on there and they've got their partners on there and their kids on there, it's like
dinner.
It takes the mystery away a bit, right?
Definitely.
And the whole social thing, if I could get rid of it all, I would, to be honest.
Yeah. Do it.
I'd fuck it
just
off.
Delete it.
No
all
Instagram,
now.
no Twitter, nothing. I would just put stuff out and that would be it. I wouldn't have this big fanfare, because that's to me that how I kind of. It never stopped me being into it, but obviously the business has changed now. I wouldn't do any of that stuff if I had a choice.
Yeah,
but I don't think there is a choice now. I know there's a few artists like Italo Johnson and people, they put out a lot of vinyl. I mean, Italo Johnson don't even title their records.
Really?
The tracks are called 08, so 08 will be the 8th record on that label, and it will just be 08A or 08B. That's what it's called.
That's cool. You know what? I think they might have taken. Well, maybe they didn't take that idea off Reflex Records, but Reflex Records, Aphex Twin's early record label. There's an interview with Richard and what's the guy that it's someone called Grant Claridge Wilson or something. It's the other guy that runs Reflex Records, and what the interview is like. Why don't you give any of your tracks any titles? And Aphex Twin's like, doesn't matter. Doesn't fucking matter what the title is, so we just call it like X4167.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. And it's a really good point. It's like, to me, it's just about the music. The title doesn't matter at all.
Yeah.
So, I think enigma is a key word that I think about a lot in terms of, like, if people give you 5% of a story, the human brain will generate this 95% of the other things and fill the gaps. So, yeah, I think a healthy balance of being not accessible is probably a good thing for an artist. I mean, artists like Burial, Banksy as well. You know, things like that. People were like, "Oh, I don't know anything, but I want to know more."
Yeah.
So yeah, maybe it's perhaps good advice. People are saying that you're too accessible.
So now it's just about figuring out how I pare that back and like what that looks like, and you know. But
he's so rude now. 5 years ago, such a nice
I know.
guy.
Well, that's
his ego
that's
gone
the problem, isn't
now.
it? People are like, "Oh, he started doing these things. He's doing Defecting in Croatia and Ibiza. Now he's all of a sudden he's like, you know." But that's the sort of problem. I guess if you have management, that kind of removes a big part of that, because you can then just say, well, you need to speak to my management, and then they kind of filter things for you and have the difficult conversations. You're talking to them every day, every other day, but they're doing all of the direct dealing with people. So that can be a cool thing. But then of course, again, it's a relationships business. That's the thing, you know. You are kind of you are dependent on and beholden to, in a way, the relationships that you make, the friends that you make, basically. If they think of you before anybody else for that gig or for that remix, that's because of your relationship with them.
Definitely, yeah.
And you have to be able to do the thing that they want to a good standard and have the talent to do it. But like, you've got to sometimes just be first in their mind. That is what helps you get that thing. Oh, I thought of you. All right, cool. You know, so it is a relationships business, and you do sort of live and die by the people that you know. Like, you know, the classic, it's who you know, not what you know. But it's balancing that with, you know, with trying to be a bit more of an enigma.
You're really established now as a DJ as well as a producer and remixer. It'd be really interesting to hear, like, where has your DJ career taken you over the world?
I've played all over the US, or quite a lot of the US. I can't remember how many states it is, but it's like between 10 and 15 states I've done in the US, which is a fair amount. I've done a lot of places in Europe, like and sort of Eastern Europe, like Georgia, Russia, Portugal, Switzerland,
you mentioned,
obviously Amsterdam in Holland. I'm playing Barcelona tomorrow for Off Sonars in Berlin a couple of weeks ago. I'm in Ibiza this month as well for Defected, Croatia in August. That'll be the first time I've ever been to Croatia.
That looks like a great party.
It looks awesome. I've heard so much good stuff about it. And obviously Simon, who runs Defected, and that whole kind of Defected crew, it's like a big family really. So I'm sort of happy to be doing that, and hopefully, you know, going forward, getting some music out on their labels and stuff. That's the idea. Obviously, you just got to send them stuff and kind of work that relationship and actually have music that they're going to be happy with and want to put out. But in terms of the festival, it's like, I mean, I know loads of people that have gone the last couple of years, and it's just everyone's a little bit older. People are just there for the right reasons. They're all kind of, everybody knows each other really, because it's essentially, I mean, there's like 3,000 people, but it's basically one big family. So it's great. I love the guys that work for Defected. Wes Saunders is like a really good friend of mine. He's awesome. I really like Andy Daniel. He's got a good ear. Great A&R guy. Simon's, I mean, obviously Simon's a bit of a legend anyway in the music business. And if you're not going to listen to these people when they give you advice on your music, you're stupid.
Yeah.
You know? You're not going to listen to it. I don't know what you're doing.
Yeah, actually, I'm doing my own thing, Simon.
Yeah,
Thank
it's
you
okay.
very
It's
much.
all right. I think I've got this. You know, even though you've sold like millions and millions of records, I think I know a bit better. Luke Solomon also is someone that's I've kind of always looked up to as being, obviously he was, you know, classic co-founder with Derek Carter, and so he's always played really good stuff and kind of never really played like what you'd consider to be the obvious stuff, which I really like about him. And Sam Devine's awesome as well. She's kind of like a sort of, not, I wouldn't say she's a good friend, but she's like a good mate, you know. We're talking about going out and having a dinner soon and all that sort of stuff with her boyfriend, or soon to be husband, should I say, Hatcher, who's also sound. So, you know, so there's loads of people there that you kind of get on with, and again, it's like a kind of like big family really, you know. So I'm really looking forward to doing that. And I'm going a couple of days early before my sets to like hang out and have conversations and do all that side of it.
Oh, that's good.
And then as soon as I leave there, I'm going straight to Ibiza the next day to play for them as well.
Nice.
So I'm doing 3 sets on the Saturday at Croatia, and then I'm doing 1 on the Sunday in Ibiza. So it's going to be a pretty full-on day the Saturday, and then I've got to get up at crazy time to leave for Ibiza. But you know,
superb.
That's the name of the game, right?
Yeah,
so
yeah,
you have
yeah.
to do it.
And it's like the summertime, it's like where everyone parties, it's
Yeah,
the place to be.
Everyone's going to be in a good frame of mind. I'm hoping I've got like a bunch of music kind of done or thereabouts, so I can play some new stuff and test some bits out, and that's the aim anyway.
That must be so good to go out there knowing like this is the season for house music and for parties, and I've got a new track I want to try out, you know. That must be such an amazing thing to crossfade into that new track, you know?
Yeah, it's trying to get everything done though. That's the thing. It's trying to be like, I've got to be on point as a DJ. I'm doing 3 different sets. I'm doing three very kind of different sets musically. So I've got to be prepared for those. I want to have, you know, you got to have everything set up in a way that is like, I want my own edits of things because I'm very particular about what I play. I want to make playlists. I want stuff that other people are not going to have. I want to have my own stuff. It's a lot. I mean, just being a DJ, just being a good DJ is a full-time job.
Yes.
Scouring, finding music, making sure that you're practicing, that you're technically on point, that you're using the equipment well, that you're doing all that stuff, buying music, listening to promos, doing your own edits of stuff to kind of so it fits in your sets, and doing the DJ mixes and the guest mixes that people want off you. That's a full-time job.
Yeah, absolutely.
To do that to the best,
Really.
to do it really well, to me, it's a full-time job.
It's almost like being in medicine, because in medicine, it's like a constantly changing world with like, you know, new drugs that are coming in and new procedures. So you've always got to be reading up on the things that are happening almost on a monthly basis. And it seems like DJs is a similar situation.
Every gig you do is different as well. I mean, maybe you reach a point where you're playing at some massive festival, right? Like you're like Oliver Heldens, right? So you're going and playing at this festival, and pretty much what you play is set, because there's 20,000 people there, and unless you play like a complete disaster, they're all pretty much going to stay there, right? So you play within this ballpark of like, well, all these things fit. I can play any of these. You might have it prearranged, you might not, but you know in this folder you're probably going to play 20 of these records or 15 of these records, whatever. And so you just play them. There isn't really this idea that like you're affecting what's happening on the dance floor. You obviously want to play music that people love in that moment, and that they have a moment to, and that they relate to, and that they're big moments in the day, right? You want to have those. But if you play something that people only 80% of the people really like it, they're not really going anywhere. You're going to lose attrition. Like, a few people are going to walk off and do different things and go to a different stage, but mostly the chunk of people are staying there because they've waited there for hours, or they've been there for hours, right? It's different if you play in a club. Like, you've actually got to play the right music, or you're this far away from people, you know whether they're having a good time or not. Whereas at a festival, it's just like everybody's there. It's like this homogenous kind of crowd, right? When you're doing those types of things, it's a bit different. When you're doing clubs and stuff a lot, or like you're doing a pool party or a beach thing or whatever, because I do a lot of that kind of stuff too, because I've done a lot of the deeper stuff. So I don't always get to play clubs, although I like doing that. So then you've got to think about where you're playing. There's actually a thought process of like, well, where am I playing today? And like, oh, I'm playing in Berlin, but I'm playing with this type of lineup, so I've got to kind of play it this way. And then the next week you're in Barcelona, and it's like, I'm doing a pool party, right? Well, it's probably going to be completely different.
Totally different, yeah.
And it's the daytime, it's not the nighttime. So you're actually having to think about that. So that takes work. The idea that you just turn up and play records is a weird one, because you don't. Like, there's hours of preparation before you even get to that gig to do 2 hours of music. Definitely. You know, I'm already thinking about, I've already spent last night downloading music, going through promos. I've got to sort out my record box, sort out all my USBs, make sure I've got all my equipment, do all that side of it. And then you're already kind of thinking about all that before you get to the gig. So you've already invested time.
It's a huge investment. And this is aside from the technical investment of, for example, knowing that at the end of this track there's like a half-second beat before the drop that makes it go out of the, you know, the sort of beat match mode. Like, knowing all the records inside out is another element on top of it.
Yeah.
But I mean, what's Ibiza like? Can you sum it up for me as someone who's never been, and for anyone else who's never been to Ibiza? What's it like to go out there and DJ and play?
It's great. Ibiza? I think Ibiza is like, again, is one of these places that's got like a special kind of energy, you know, and that's why people sort of really like gravitate towards it. And obviously for house music, it's been very influential in spreading that sound and kind of, and it's had a huge influence. But it's like one of those kind of like milestone moments, you know. It's like these things that you sort of look forward to doing, or you think about, oh, it'd be great to do that one day, to something to tick off your list. But then of course, once you do that, there's always other levels that you want to go to. You're like, well, yeah, I've played for this club now, I've done this thing for this person, but now I want to headline this room, or I want to play main slot for Defected, or I want to do this thing for this, you know, brand or whatever. So I think all of that happens. I mean, unless you happen to be very, very fortunate and you're somebody like Carl Cox, or, and you're kind of the king of Ibiza, so you can sort of do what you want, right? But for most people, it's great. I mean, it's great. The summer comes around, and it's great to go and hang out and do all that stuff, and it's great to be somewhere where it's like really warm, and everyone's in a good mood, and also from an economic perspective, it's great because usually you're DJing on a night that you wouldn't be working over here, right? So like a Sunday night, Defected's every Sunday this year, for example. Sunday or Monday or a Tuesday is great. I mean, yeah, it breaks your week up and makes production and studio a bit harder, but a Sunday night you wouldn't be DJing over here. You'd be indoors, right? Unless it was a bank holiday. So that's great because it now extends your working possibilities to 3 nights a week during the summer, as opposed to just 2.
That's cool.
So that's kind of cool because then you're kind of constantly in the flow of and going out and DJing is like, and playing your own music and playing records and keeping in that flow is so important. You know, if you're especially if you don't have equipment, you don't have your own equipment, then you might go a month without DJing, or I don't know, 2 weeks or 6 weeks, whatever. And if you just love playing music, that's hard to do. And also then you've got all this new stuff that you've not played yet. So you haven't, when you talk about that technical aspect of knowing, right, the vocal comes in here or the thing goes out there and all that side of it, that's kind of crucial to understanding all of that. And Definitely. Without that, you don't get to do it.
I really liked your analogy of America gave birth to house music and Britain brought it up.
Yeah.
Is Ibiza like going to the grandparents' house for a little bit and just doing whatever you want for a while?
I guess so. Yeah, I guess it is. Yeah, there's I mean, London's kind of, London's like that too, in the sense that there's a lot going on and there's loads of choice, and like there's those kind of creative people doing like good parties and stuff. But you're right. I mean, I think as well, it's I think we attach in this country, a very particular sort of meaning to it, because it's not warm here all the time, and so English people are like obsessed with holidays anyway, right? And warm weather anyway. There's this kind of idea that there's like a getaway or a week in the sun, you know. Whereas like people that live in America don't necessarily have that concept. People that live in Florida or California don't have that concept because it's just warm all the time. But over here, we're kind of attached emotionally to the idea of the sunshine anyway, and to holidays. So when you put that together with music and being outside all day and having this carefree time, all of those things go into the reason why a place kind of becomes magical, right? Because you're kind of living your best life, but you're also doing it in a place that's, you know, so sort of geared towards like having fun, right? And being warm and being outside, and a lot of the things you can't do when you live in England. And you're kind of like, you know, obviously it's a big part of English humour to talk about the weather and how grey it is and all this kind of thing, and this is the complete opposite of that. So I think that's had a big part of it, a big part in it as well, and it's kind of in its legacy and it's kind of like lore, you know, the folklore of it.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I guess also in DJing, the image is quite an important thing that in production and in music in general, the image is heightened now, isn't it? And I think, and you had an incident earlier on this year where where you were asked to, would you like to explain what happened?
Yeah, so basically it wasn't me that dealt with the emails. It was Kelly, who's my fiance, but she also does like some admin and bookings and stuff for me. To take some of that away from me, basically, so I don't have to do it, so it saves me some time to be creative. And so this inquiry came in. It was like a very basic inquiry, and the person was like, "Hey, I'm representing this brand, and we're interested in booking Scott for a couple of parties, and you know, I think it was like, can you let me know about his availability or something like that?"
So they approached you.
It was kind of just cold, straight out. And she went back and said something along the lines of, yes, this is the fee. Scott's available. Like, what dates are we looking at? This is generally the fee, and there might be a potential for a discount on the fee if both dates are booked at the same time, and both deposits are paid to confirm. And he would also require, you know, hotel accommodation, transfers, etc. And then I'm struggling to remember the exact conversation because it's obviously been a while now. But basically, then there was like a week that passed or something, and I think maybe she went back to them and said, "Oh, hey, is there any like movement on this or whatever? You know, do you need any more information or something?" And they essentially, the person came back and said, "Oh, you know, after discussing it with the team, we've decided not to go ahead with booking Scott. We don't feel his image fits," or something like that.
Yeah,
and
very vague.
Yeah, and so she would kind of press them on that and was like, "Well, okay, no problem. Like, it's no problem if you don't want booking. That's not an issue. But you've added this extra bit in afterwards." So obviously, naturally, you're going to be like, "Well, what do you mean by that?" Like,
yeah,
that's
and they've approached
sort of,
you in the first place.
Yeah, it's kind
well.
of provocative to say that. You could just not say that. You could just say, "Oh, we went in a different direction," or "We don't have the budget," or "We made different choices," or "With the lineup's full now. It was an afterthought," whatever, you know. But they didn't. They chose to say the image doesn't fit, and so then she was like, "Well, what do you mean the image doesn't fit?" And then that's when, you know, that they came back and said, "Well, we had a look at a few pictures, and it like appears that Scott's a bit overweight, and overall just doesn't really fit with our Ibiza ethos and image, right? Or like vibe or whatever they said. I can't remember." And so that was kind of like, and she, you know, after she didn't reply after that, but
yeah, I think you dealt with that situation very well, because I mean, I think there's other people that probably would have shouted out who it was, and where they were, and let's all hoard these people and destroy them collectively. But you didn't do that. You just explained the situation, and it was a really good. I think it was a really good sort of indication of how superficial some clubs can be, and about how superficial the music industry can be at times, isn't it?
Yeah, and Ibiza has kind of been guilty of getting a bit like that, to be honest. You know, with all the sort of bottle service places and people sort of being obsessed with what they look like, kind of hashtag Ibiza body, and it's like the idea of sort of like having to look a certain way because, you know, and a lot of it comes from girls because they feel under pressure. That's why they feel under pressure with their image to conform to certain standards or be mocked, basically.
Yeah.
And guys have come in for a lot more of that over the years, over recent years. You know, men's grooming now is a big thing, like men kind of putting as much effort into their appearance as women did. I'm not saying men shouldn't care and all of this, but I don't think women should care as much either. I just think it's something that's within society generally, and so it's going to permeate other things. It's going to permeate employment. It's going to permeate the music industry, the fashion industry, whatever it might be. And for me, I genuinely most of the time see the funny side of things. So if there's an opportunity to like make a joke about something, I'll make a joke about it, you know, and worry about it later. And I'm kind of like that in my personal life. You know, I don't let a good joke go to waste, right? Even if it's kind of a bit close to the edge or funny or whatever, you know, or kind of a bit edgy or whatever. But like, so really me sharing it was sort of just to draw some attention to like the ridiculousness of it, really.
Yeah, exactly.
It wasn't like, oh my god, I'm really hurt and upset by this thing. It was like, hey, look how stupid this is.
Yeah.
But there was a little bit of a temptation, I suppose, to just be like, yeah, these people should just like, we should just say who this is. But there was loads of stuff happening behind the scenes, like people reaching out to me, like I even had PR companies reaching out to me. I had like legal people reaching out to me and saying, oh, you have to be really careful about what you say about this venue and stuff like that. Right. Because they will, you know, can turn around and say, well, this person doesn't represent us and you're kind of defaming our business and etc etc. And there were other people that were coming out and saying, like, you have an obligation to say who this is. Like, someone in your position, you have like a moral kind of obligation to out these people.
Yeah.
More than one person. Then other people were like, do you want to come on and talk about this? And I was like, well, I don't really mind if we talk about a bunch of stuff and talk about that for a bit, but I don't want to go on your show and talk about that for an hour.
Yes.
Because that makes kind of a mockery of the fact that I've said I'm trying not to like profit from it.
Focus on it. Yeah.
It's all well and good if you say, oh, hey, talk about your career and your life, and then there's 5 minutes where you talk about that thing. I think that's fine, and I suggested that to people. But, you know, I even had some company in Germany that were kind of the equivalent of like the BBC, but they were like, it was like the music part of there, and they were like, oh, you've come to our attention, do you want to talk about this thing? And I was like, not really, you're like a major news agency, you know. I had and then DJ Mag picked it up, Mix Mag picked it up. But what I kind of found annoying about the whole thing really was that a lot of these publications that said something about me, they haven't ever supported my music. This is the first time they've bothered with me. Do you know what I mean? And I get, you know, and that just again plays into the idea that like drama and sort of, you know, negativity
Scandal
is like the way to go about things. It's like, well, hold on a second. When I put an EP out, or when I did a remix on Defected, or when I did this thing, you weren't interested. You didn't write about it. But now this story's come out that you didn't even report. You've picked it up off somebody else. It's like lazy journalism, you know. It's just like, you know, Mixmag prints something or presses put something up, and they become like a Reuters, right? They're like the news agency. Everyone goes and gets that story. It's like, well, you didn't source that story yourself. You're not the one who is telling the story, but yet, you know, you kind of want this thing now for people to talk about, but you haven't. It's not like there's loads of stuff up on their site that's about my music or my DJ mixes or places I've played or whatever. You haven't bothered with me up until this point, and now you're interested.
Exactly.
So that's a bit disheartening, but
I guess
again, it's the nature of the business.
Exactly. But I think it's a good thing for younger people who are maybe getting into music to see that those sorts of things can happen. And I think most people, I mean, everyone that I saw on the social media was like totally supportive of you and was like, well, this is bullshit, you know. I think that's the good thing. Integrity is something that you can sense from people, isn't it? It's something that you just know that this is a good thing and this is a bad. And I guess for that company, they're not going to prosper, and maybe karma will come back to them in another way for this weird behaviour.
I think as well, what's interesting about the whole dialogue that was had with them is that it doesn't, like, I wouldn't probably have ended up doing the gigs anyway, you know, knowing kind of what they're about, and you know, because at the point it was literally just a preliminary discussion, like, hey, this is the place. And I'm like kind of, you know, I'm talking on behalf of them, or we work with them or whatever. And is this something that you're open to? Okay, cool. Well, this is the fee. Like, what dates are we talking about? They might have turned around and said this date, and I would have, we would have been like, well, I can't do that date.
Yeah.
So that's the end of the discussion anyway.
Yeah.
So that's the thing. I probably wouldn't have ended up doing it based on kind of where it was and sort of what the clientele is, and like, you know, you do need to try and pick things that fit with what you're doing, right? Whether that's remixes, whether it's labels that you're working with, whether it's gigs, it all kind of needs to make sense. So, you know, I probably wouldn't have ended up doing it anyway.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what's weird about it. But
yeah, I think the way you dealt with that was fantastic, and there's a way that you could have dealt with that which would have been detrimental to them and you, but I think the way you dealt with that with humour and humility, yeah, it was really good. And yeah, like, you didn't out them. You were.
Yeah, I had a lot of people saying the same thing. I'm glad I did it in that way in the end.
Yeah,
I'm glad I did it that way. Like I say, there's always a small temptation to sort of just react and be sort of angry about it in the initial, like, to do that thing, and then once it's out there, and then it becomes a whole other thing. Especially with the way people picked it up and put it on blogs and stuff like that, it would have been, you know, there's no way of putting it back in the box once it's gone. So I'm glad that I approached it the way I did in the end.
Definitely, it's a good thing for people to learn from. So just, yeah, what have you got? What are you working on at the moment? What's in the future for you?
Well, I'm working on like 3 more EPs for Grand Plans at the moment. So there's like loads of stuff that's kind of just been on the boil for like, I don't know, 9 months or something, on and off. Some are a bit more developed than others, but so I'm doing that. A couple of remixes in the pipeline. I've got something coming out for Husky next week. It's an Australian producer. That's going well. So he's happy with that. That's coming out, next week. I go to Barcelona tomorrow to play for Off Sonar event. Then Ibiza next week. And then July I'll be in the studio, like hopefully working on some original stuff as well as the Grand Plan stuff. There's kind of, you know, the stuff for Defected, which I'm kind of hoping that I can get the right material to them, and we can work kind of on doing some songs and some original projects, because I'm hoping they'll, you know, they want original music that they can sell and publish, and you know, and so I'm hoping that I can kind of, well, the conversations are already kind of ongoing, or have been ongoing, about, well, hey, look, if I do this thing and I send it to you and you can get somebody to sing on it and we can kind of do it, and it's a collaboration, and then hopefully I think they sort of feel, you know, the label then feels invested in it because they helped that thing happen, right? Mm-hmm. You know, that's a sign of a good label to me. You want to facilitate people making music and good things happening. It's like if you're a publisher, you get your producer that you're publishing and a singer that you're publishing, and you put them together, because you own the publishing for that, and you're also facilitating things happening. So that's kind of what Defected partly do, which they're good at, is they say, well, actually this person might sound good on this, or this person should remix this, right? And you're kind of looking to put together things that make sense. So I'm doing that. So hopefully that's going to be a long-term thing with them. I'd love to get kind of a long-term relationship going with them, because I think it's a place that I fit in quite well. So that's good. And then obviously Croatia and Ibiza in August, and then some other sort of gigs on the horizon. I'm doing like Edinburgh, like Glasgow and stuff, and other than that, it's just keep on making music, really. Keep doing just keep on making as much music as I can, and like I said earlier, trying to focus on doing more original stuff, less remixes. The label Grand Plans is something that we're looking to kind of build as well. We've only done 4 releases, but we want to kind of get that up to like 9 or 10 as quick as possible, and then maybe start doing a couple of little pop-up events here and there, kind of some merchandise and things like that, and doing, we've got a website, so you know, it's kind of very basic at the moment, but the idea is that will become a thing, and we can kind of sell the music through there as well as do the merch and stickers and all that sort of stuff. So that's what we're thinking, but I want it to be sort of an actual serious label. I don't want to have like 2, 3 or 4 releases and then be like, hey, buy our t-shirts, you know. I want it to be a kind of an actual thing. And the other thing as well, it's so different from the other stuff I'm doing. I think that it makes sense if I kind of position it as an outlet for, like, this is my jazzy deep house stuff, you know, or this is a jazzy deep house label like Free Range or like Footwork label or whatever. It's in that mode, but I do other stuff as well. But when you see my name on Grand Plans, you know it's going to be that. And then we can kind of do something, and we will sign other people's stuff too, but it just has to be really good. And right now I haven't had anything that I've been like, wow, this is like really, really good. I'd rather put my own stuff out, because the amount of money we put into each release, I'm not going to invest that into something that I don't really love. and that's why it takes me so long to get the releases together, because I'm picking from only a certain number of tracks. But that's the idea with that, so that will keep going. And just continuing doing some sound design projects, doing the sample label as well.
Cool.
And that's it. Just keep going, basically.
Good. Well, you're doing tremendously well. And like I said to you on Twitter the other week, I don't know anyone who releases as many records as you do. And your response was you don't think you're doing enough of them.
No, I don't. But this is the thing. It's a lot of it's remixes as well. That's the thing. A lot of them are remixes, and that's great. You're right. Still putting something out there, but I think remixes and original records do different things for you. Like people, you sort of really get big. It's very rare that you get big from just being a remixer only. People really look at your original material as like a kind of reflection of like who you are as an artist, and so there has to be a lot more of that happening from me, I think, and that's kind of what I'm working towards.
And maybe dial back the accessibility.
Maybe dial back the accessibility. Yeah. I'll have to look at that, I think.
Cool. And just one final thing, in terms of aside from music, where do you go, like, as a place of serenity to relax, or what do you like to do where you can get a release from it?
I like obviously spending time with my fiance is awesome, but I mean she's not here at the moment, she's in America, so that obviously doesn't happen right now. But I like all the usual, spending time with my family, like my nephews and nieces and stuff. That's kind of the usual response, isn't it? But I like making drinks. I like mixology and cocktails.
Oh, fantastic.
I'm kind of interested in the sort of science and art of like making drinks, so I'm interested in that. I mean, in all honesty, everything's kind of music related. I love good food. I really like nice restaurants and kind of that kind of thing. So that's cool. But it's and I'm a big Chelsea supporter as well. So I love my football. Yeah. So the World Cup, I'll be all over. I've got to strike the balance between watching the World Cup and still getting loads of stuff done in the next month.
I think that's
it's going to be a challenge.
Every producer's challenge for the next month is like keeping an eye on what's happening. Yeah, we were quite lucky today in that the fixtures weren't like big ones, but we have got Spain, Portugal tonight,
right.
which is
Morocco, Iran is like on round about now. I think I'm not too worried about that one, but yeah, you're right. It's a challenge.
Great. Well, thank you very much for talking to me. It's been great to speak to you.
Thanks for having me on.
Cheers. Thank you. Oh, it was really good to speak to Scott. He was a really, really nice guy. I think he looks like a real tough guy. I was a bit worried about that one, but he was really cool. And really insightful too. He's quite a deep thinker and really quite open to talking about things on a level beyond the superficial, which is fantastic. And it also turned out that Spain-Portugal game was an absolute classic of the tournament too. So it was a good day. Okay, next month I'm speaking to a mastering engineer who has had a ridiculous career, and I can't even begin to explain the artist that he's worked for. It's a who's who of British rock music. So look forward to that one next month. That'll be out in early December. Thank you very much for listening. I am midierror. This was midierror Meets, and I'll see you again soon.